Hey everybody, Matt Johnston here, and we are back with another video. We're going to be talking a little bit more about sexual harassment. We're not really going to be talking a whole lot about the subjects of it, but this video we're going to be talking about how to conduct a proper investigation. So before we get started, please click that subscribe button that you see down there below. It's somewhere down in there somewhere. And if you want to find out when we get more content published on videos, be sure you click that little bell and you will get a notice. So this is following on from the recent allegations against Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York and the sexual harassment allegations that have been made against him. I don't really want to go into that. I didn't go into that in previous videos, but one of the most shocking findings that came out of the Attorney General's report was the fact that an investigation of the allegations was not conducted, even though senior leadership gave credibility to the women who were making the allegations and even took informal actions to limit the interaction between these particular women and the governor. Now, what I'm about to talk about doesn't really work well when you're dealing with the governor of a state. The governor of a state is an elected official. Removing him involves some very specific legal and state constitutional issues and procedures, impeachment, things like that. But it is a good point to deal with the issue of high-ranking employees versus lower-ranking employees. But when we're talking about an investigation, one of the biggest challenges that an employer faces or HR faces is who is the HR department or the investigator, who are they protecting? Are they protecting the employees against the company, or are they protecting the company against the complaining employees? It really is not mutually exclusive. And that's probably one of the biggest myths that we're talking about when we're dealing with investigations of HR or of HR matters or of sexual harassment in particular. By protecting the employees, we are actually protecting the company. So one of the ways in which you can manage how to handle an HR investigation or a sexual harassment investigation is to do so with a plan that is in place. Having a plan goes a very long way to making sure that you're going to be conducting a good sexual harassment investigation. So what is involved in making a plan? Well, first, determine the scope of the investigation. What's the main question the investigator has to answer? Oftentimes that's going to be, did sexual harassment take place? Is that a violation of the policy of the company? Now, this is an important consideration to be concerned about. The policy of the company is what is being measured against. Not against the law, not against a criminal matter, although those could result from what has happened. What an HR investigator is doing is determining whether or not the policy of the company was violated. So making a plan also helps prevent things like scope creep. So if you make a plan about a particular complaint or a series of complaints that's been made by one or more employees, you want to make sure you're sticking with those complaints. If you learn of other complaints, it may be necessary to set them aside and conduct a separate investigation. But it's very easy to get into scope creep, and it's very easy to start involving things that aren't going to be relevant to this particular investigation. So some of the other questions that need to be answered is, who's going to conduct the investigation? In particular, this might be hard for small businesses. Particularly small businesses, you're dealing with maybe fewer than 10 employees. The person that is receiving the complaints is often the boss, and they're probably ill-equipped to conduct an investigation. So you can contract with outside counsel to do an investigation. You could contact various HR experts that are out there who may be able to do these kinds of investigations. So who will investigate? What evidence is going to need to be collected? So you're going to be conducting some interviews. You're going to look at some documentary evidence perhaps. There may even be film or video evidence. So if there's security cameras around, for example. You're going to also determine who's going to be interviewed about this particular case. Not everything is a he said, she said sort of thing. Now, you do have to be mindful of things like secondhand reports versus eyewitness things, but that goes to the weight of the evidence, not whether or not you need to collect it. Okay? To protect the credibility of the process, having an outside investigator is probably a good idea. If you're a larger employee, maybe you have somebody at HR, maybe not. But sometimes it's going to be better to have somebody outside the company conduct the investigation. Okay. One reason why having an outside investigator is it's a little bit easier for the outside investigator to remain neutral in the process. If you're not going to have an outside investigator, you need to make sure that you are approaching the investigation from a neutral point of view. Not from a position of, oh, I've heard about this before, or your particular viewpoint or your particular assessment of the employee can't come into this. And that's why it's often difficult for small business owners to conduct their own investigation. So it's going to be necessary to bring in somebody out from the outside. The other thing that you want to avoid is labels. Now, this sounds a little bit silly, but using labels like victim and perpetrator or victim and harasser presupposes some sort of finding. It presupposes that somebody has done something wrong, and you want to avoid this. So if you go in thinking a particular person is a victim, there's a really high probability that you're going to find that the person was a victim and therefore the harasser is guilty. And that is one potential outcome of an investigation. So be neutral, remain neutral. And if you cannot remain neutral, then you need to bring in a third party from outside to conduct the investigation. Other things that you can do to remain neutral is prepare your investigative questions early, at the front. Okay, so that you know some questions that you're going to ask. So things like, were there witnesses? Did anybody see you upset? Who saw you before the incident? Who saw you after the incident? Where did the incident take place? You're going to be asking for facts. You're going to be asking for things to develop. I strongly encourage the use of open-ended questions. In the law, we call that it's a direct examination. You're not trying to guide a response. You want the person to communicate what they're thinking fully. Avoid questions that might lead to a particular conclusion or might lead to a particular statement from somebody. You're going to have to review a lot of information. So it could be anything from voicemails, text messages. The dumbest complaint that I ever had to deal with was an employee who was using Snapchat and sending photographs of his genitalia to a subordinate. So yeah, modern tools sometimes make it difficult, but you're going to have to review all of that information. And some of that information is rarely going to lead to a smoking gun. You're going to have to make some inferences. You're going to have to generate and balance information and make an assessment. Okay? The next thing that you want to consider when you are working with these kinds of investigations is you want to be documenting everything as you go along. Take notes. Take detailed notes. Do not throw those notes away. When you're conducting this investigation, you want to be able to go back and look at everything from an objective standpoint. Okay? Now, finally, the thing that you're going to have to do as an investigator is you're going to have to make a decision. Was policy violated? And if policy is violated, you may have to make a recommendation to a decision maker about what steps to take. before, I repeat, before you take a negative job action, which could be a suspension, demotion, termination, these kinds of things, you should definitely consult with legal counsel. So even if you're conducting the investigation yourself, or you hire an outside investigator who's not an attorney, you want to have or even if they are an attorney, you want to have separate independent counsel give you some advice as to whether or not what you are doing is a good step. Conduct that pre-action review before you take action. All right. The last thing that I want to talk about is you want to make sure you write a report. That report should cover everything that you've done. It should cover what your investigative plan was. It should include transcripts if you have them, or at least connections to any recordings that you made. You want to have all of the evidence that you reviewed and consulted, both listed and if it's available in documentary form. You want to discuss your how you came about to your decision that the policy was violated, and have your sort of deductive reasoning standpoint in there, and you want to write all of that out. Now, some people will say, well, my gosh, if that's there and it happened, we could be in trouble. If you don't conduct a proper investigation, you could be in even bigger trouble. A number of Governor Cuomo's aides are personally going to be in some pretty hot water because they failed to investigate. An investigation is real, it's serious, it's not something to rush through, so take your time. And having the investigation done and making a recommendation protects the employer, because an employee cannot say, oh, you didn't conduct an investigation, so that's a problem. At least you will have had conducted a reasonable investigation in light of all of the circumstances, and you have a report. And that report will help you later on when you are dealing with potential lawsuits, potential claims, and things of that nature. So you do want to have a report. I know it sounds risky, but it is one of the better ideas to have. Okay, so the final thing that I want to say, there is no specific step-by-step process for conducting a sexual harassment investigation. Each investigation is going to be a little bit different, but you should have some key common factors, and the most important thing is to be methodical about it. So you can work with counsel to develop a policy, a guide map, sort of a checklist of how you're going to create and the things that you want to do to create a proper investigation. But you want to have some sort of process in place. So the big lesson that I want folks to realize from this video is it is not something to just sort of do on a pro forma basis. Allegations of sexual harassment are serious. They can lead to very serious consequences if they are not handled in a proper manner, if they are not handled in a neutral manner, and if they are not handled with the respect that is necessary for the allegations that have been made. Don't speed through the investigation. The law says that you need to do a prompt investigation. Prompt means don't delay, but also don't just rush through it either. Be reasonable. Now, if you happen to have some need to have a sexual harassment investigation, or you want to talk about developing a policy or developing a mechanism to conduct an investigation, please give us a call. You're going to see our scheduling link down below. In the meantime, I hope you'll go out and watch some live soccer and subscribe to the videos by clicking this button. Other content you're going to be able to see right up there. In the meantime, have a good day. We'll speak to you later. Bye-bye.